Hi guys, it is January 7, 2020. Breaking news. Though you may have already heard the news, nonetheless, it's still breaking. It's certainly an interruption from the Australia fires, but I gotta do this because it looks like, oof, we may be in big trouble very soon. But I'm gonna start with this. Trump campaign spends $10 million on 60-second Super Bowl ad. 10 million on a 60-second campaign ad. Considering the number of Americans who are so hurting. Think of the farmers. Think of all the people who have lost their homes. Oh, the list is long. He would have turned the tide, for my abject disrespect for that guy, if he had come out and said, we were going to spend 10 million on this ad, but I think it's more important for that 10 million to go to help Americans who are really struggling. Oh, right, how could they be struggling? The economy is great. The economy is great. And farming in America, it's great. Everything's great. All right, yeah. Priorities. Priorities really show you who the person is. Oh, but Carol, come on. There's a presidential campaign. I don't care. We're supposed to be the morally superior country. And what? How we behave, what we do, is antithetical to anything moral. So, Iraq, I'm sure you have heard, their parliament has voted to get rid of the United States. Get your troops out. You go. We don't want you here anymore. And this has been a long-standing wish of most Iraqis. And I posted videos years ago about their parliament, people in the Iraqi government, and what was holding back the final vote was to get rid of the United States, was how much we bribe the politicians in Iraq. So, yeah. What might be the implications of this? This is a very good article. The USA doubles down on its Saudi allegiance. For the United States to abandon proxy warfare and directly kill one of Iran's most senior political figures has changed international politics in a fundamental way. It is a massive error. Its ramifications are profound and complex, and you should bookmark Craig Murray's site. I really like what this guy has to say, and thank you for saying it, Craig. Tehran will be pleased because the USA has just definitely lost Iraq. Iraq has a Shia majority and so naturally tends to ally with Iran. The only thing preventing that was the Arab nationalism of Saddam Hussein's Ba'athist Socialist Party. Bush and Blair were certainly fully informed that by destroying the Ba'athist system, they were creating an Iranian-Iraqi nexus. But they decided that was containable. Really? You think it is? So, the Iraqi Prime Minister, Mahdi, had until now tiptoed with great care. Pro-Iranian, yet a long-term American client. his government maintained a form of impartiality based on an open hand to accept massive bribes from anybody. That's over. He is now pro-Iranian. So, Trump, by assassinating Soleimani, has put our soldiers in Iraq in harm's way. Okay, Iran fires more than a dozen ballistic missiles at 2 U.S. air bases in Iraq. Oh, and Trump is sitting down with his national security team as I speak. What will Trump do? So, President Trump has been briefed and is consulting with the national security team, and he's preparing to address the nation. Great. He's going to talk to us about the actions that he's going to take against Iran. Wasn't it Hillary that everybody was scared of? She was going to start the war in Iran. And Trump was going to get us out of all of these unnecessary wars. All right, well, you know, we're looking at something really big. Council on Foreign Relations President Richard Haass said the world will be the battlefield after Iran escalation. Okay, well, make no mistake, any war with Iran will not look like the 1990 Gulf War or 2003 Iraq wars. It will be fought throughout the region with a wide range of tools versus a wide range of civilian, economic, and military targets. The region, and possibly the world, will be the battlefield. Thank you, Trump. So, we're going to war, bro. Fort Bragg's 82nd Airborne deploys to the Middle East. All right, well, they're going to get the job done, and Trump, oh, that real estate mogul, that reality TV star, great, oh my God. 600 mostly young soldiers at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, were headed for the Middle East, part of a group of some 3,500 U.S. paratroopers ordered to the region. Kuwait is the first stop, the final destination, classified. Our nation is violently insane. Markets in turmoil. Gold and oil spike as stocks. Bond yields plunge after Iran attack. Wow, this could be the collapse of the economy. And still Trump will be blamed for it, along with the Trump supporters. So, the U.S. military footprint in the Middle East. We've got 14,000 troops in Afghanistan, 13,000 in Kuwait, 7,000 Bahrain, Qatar, 13,000, UAE, 5,000, Oman, 606, Saudi Arabia, 3,000, sending more, Jordan, 3,000, Iraq, 6,000, Syria, 800, Turkey, 2,500, and more going over. This is Iran. Now, if you included Iran in that axis of evil, and then you surrounded Iran with your military bases, do you think Iran might object? Do you think Iran might feel a little threatened? I'm going to play the blame game. Oh my God, Carol, how could you play the blame game? Blame. Oh my God, that word was erased from our vocabulary in the early 80s. One of the most dangerous brainwashing of the American people. Blame, holding accountable, really important. Really important. So, just want to also read this very interesting piece. So, the Prime Minister apparently revealed that the U.S. Marines had snipers firing at Iraqi protesters. Well, knowing our U.S. military, that sounds pretty right to me. But Halbusi attended the parliamentary session, and this was the session that apparently they decided to kick the U.S. out of Iraq. But, okay, Halbusi is I think he's pretty much the equivalent of the Speaker of the House, Pelosi. Halbusi is the Speaker of the Council of Representatives in Iraq's parliament. So, Halbusi attends the parliamentary session, though no Sunni members did. That's because the Americans learned Abdul Mahdi planned to reveal sensitive secrets in the session and sent Halbusi to prevent this. What was discussed in the session? The Prime Minister spoke angrily of how the Americans had ruined the country and now refused to complete the infrastructure and electricity grid projects unless they were promised 50% of oil revenues, which the Prime Minister refused. So it is apparently why the Prime Minister of Iraq visited China and signed an important agreement with them to undertake the construction instead. Right, weren't we over there to bring them freedom, and then we were going to engage in those, I forgot the term, but yeah, building up their countries and building schools, and their infrastructure. Yeah. We started on a lie, we're ending on a lie. Betrayal is the American way. So, he said, upon my return, Trump called me to rescind the agreement with China. And when I refused, he threatened me with huge demonstrations against me that would end my prime ministership. Wow, and there's huge demonstrations in Iraq and have been for quite a while. So he also said, yes, those demonstrations did materialize. And Trump calls again and says if I don't comply with his demands, he will station Marines, snipers, atop highest buildings who will target and kill protesters and security forces alike in an attempt to pressure me. Oh, I can see Trump saying that. Again, I refused and handed in my resignation, and to this day, the Americans insist on canceling our deal with China. Oh, man. I received a new call from Trump who threatened to kill both me and the Minister of Defense if we keep talking about this third side, meaning China. So to summarize, to get this straight, the U.S. has refused to finish reconstructing the country they destroyed, demanded 50% of the oil revenues from Iraq in exchange for finishing the work. And you know what? We wouldn't even finish the work. And lost their mind when Iraq looked to China. My God. So, Pompeo, I thanked Iraqi Speaker Halbusi today for condemning the Baghdad attacks by Iran. Have we ever seen any evidence that it was Iran? No. Okay. And its proxies. And I listened to these, oh my God, mainstream media reporters. I guess I'm sadistic and I turn on the Sean Hannity, radio program in my car, and I'm listening to them, and everything is a friggin' lie coming out of Hannity's mouth. And he's going on and on about how Iran is using all of these proxy armies, and that's exactly what we do. We're such friggin' hypocrites. I can't stand it. Pompeo goes on, we agreed on the importance of reducing tensions in Iraq and the region and on working together toward building a sovereign and strong Iraq. These people are sick, twisted, psychopathic. Just the violence in them is so intense. I can't even imagine. We are people who want to live. Please move your conflicts away from Iraq, Pompeo. All right. Iraqi Prime Minister was forced to resign after Trump threatened his life. You can read all about it. Well, things are definitely heating up. Another stupid war. Yeah. I wonder if Trump is speaking to the American people right now. It's 9:19 p.m. Another stupid war. We need to understand the U.S. is now at war with Iran. It's an undeclared, insane, and unconstitutional war, but it is a war nonetheless. There is no world in which one government intentionally assassinates the top general of another government and that not be warfare? How anybody can see Trump's move as not an act of war is beyond me. You can argue the U.S. and Iran were already engaged in low-level proxy wars, and that's a fair assessment, but this is far more serious. Soleimani was not only a powerful general, he was a popular figure within Iran. Unlike other blows the U.S. and Iran have inflicted upon one another, this cannot be walked back. There's no de-escalation from here, only escalation. And we got the escalation. Iran firing ballistic missiles, more than a dozen, at 2 U.S. air bases. Wow. Aren't we lucky to have a Trump in the White House? Before discussing what happens next and the big picture implications, it's worth pointing out the incredible number of blatant lies and overall clownishness that emerged from U.S. officials in the assassination's aftermath. It started with claims from Trump that Soleimani was plotting imminent attacks on Americans and was caught in the act. Just bold, outright lies that nobody ever questions. Mass media did its job and uncritically parroted this line, even though it was quickly exposed as complete falsehood. Lie. It's incredibly telling how many Americans swallow this fact-free claim, even though they've been lied to over and over and over and over again. And just recently, we learned the lies about the Afghanistan war, which I've posted on, and about, those Syrian chemical attacks. What is it with Americans? That they love their lying leaders. What is it with Americans? That they trust liars. Unbelievable. But that you do, you're going to suffer the consequences of your acceptance of these lies. So, let's just play the blame game. Let's just have a little bit of fun. Who started it? Who started it? And I'm so glad that people write these articles because it makes everything easy for me. We, as Americans, are now living in different realities. Well, we sure do know that is true. different realities, not on the same page with anything. It's surreal. Trump hit Iran. He says because Iran hit us. Trump calls Soleimani a terrorist mastermind. Iran calls the assassination an act of terrorism. Are both right? Who knows? But who started this whole mess? Nobody seems to bother asking that question. These events don't take place in isolation. Muslims, they're not a violent people. The craziness, the chaos, these Muslim, the ones who are killing other Muslims are ISIS and Al-Qaeda, and they get money from the U.S. and Saudi Arabia and other countries, but our proxy armies that we've unleashed in the Middle East to fight our war. So when I hear Americans say, just let them kill one another and let's just get out of these countries, they not understanding that we've created this mess. Americans created this mess. So believing that lie is really, well, yeah, I'd love to be on the same page with my fellow Americans, but I ain't there. So both Democrats and Republicans almost unanimously believe that whether war is the answer or not, Iran is ultimately in the wrong. They're the villain. They're they're part of that axis of evil. And they chant death to America. Well, it's not a real shock to me that they do. But the answer? Unsurprisingly, the United States is who started this. This is not to say Iran hasn't played a nefarious part of its own, or that there was zero blood on Soleimani's hands, or that there aren't human rights violations within the Islamic State. Look at the human rights violations of our fabulous country. Even the human rights violations of Americans within the United States. We are no longer that country that we lived in decades ago. It has radically changed. So, my narrow but profoundly consequential assertion is simply this. Between the two adversaries, it was the United States that started the insults and provocations that got us here, so to speak. Where is here? Exactly. A state of war, with more troops going over to the Middle East. Trump about to address the nation, if he's not doing it right now. And it could collapse the economy. Wow. Jesus, and we're only 7 days into 1 week into 2020. So much has happened. Okay, so the targeted killing of a sovereign nation's top uniformed military officer is quite obviously tantamount to war. Imagine how the U.S. would have responded if December 6, 1941, the Germans assassinated George Marshall, Army Chief of Staff, which was, that's Soleimani's equivalent. It's a declaration of war that Trump threw out. Does he care about you? No. Mr. Trump has started a war. What's perhaps more troubling is that he has unilaterally done so, committed America to what Trita Parse of the Quincy Institute recently called an irreversible escalation. Yeah, they pushed Iran into a corner. How could Iran not do something? They killed the equivalent of our Army Chief of Staff, or our Joint Chief of Staff, top commander. And what's Iran to do? They had to do something. So, that's why they did it. Because they're looking for that war. You know, oh, in 5 years, 7 countries, take them over. General Wesley Clark admitted that publicly, that that's what we were planning to do. This was after 2001, the 9/11 attacks. Well, Iran was on that list. So, Trump, he left Congress, the U.S. military, the people to pick up the pieces, because Trump is going to be very fine. He's still going to be eating that non-GMO food and living in his fabulous, luxurious palaces, and he's going to have his security keeping him safe, and he's going to be fine. We're not. We will not be fine. So it's too late now. What's done is, absent an unlikely wave of anti-war protests, it's not going to happen. As they say, it's done. Trump has changed the paradigm. See, undeclared proxy until now war had long been the name of the game played by the U.S. and Iran. So let's indulge in the blame. And let's take that word back, okay? Blaming somebody for their behavior that's wrong is a good thing, because the effect of it is to call somebody out so that they don't behave that way anymore. But people in America are too afraid. Oh, that's confrontational. I'm not confrontational. I can't do that. I have to be nice because I have to have everybody approve of me as just being this nice person. Well, you're not nice. You're all about you and keeping you safe and allowing people to behave in ways that other people have to suffer their consequences. There's a ripple effect. All right. So, I'm going to read it as it's written by Danny Jerson, I believe is how you pronounce his name, and he is a retired Army officer. Okay. So, I'll start with what will be Iran's promised and likely bloody response, and he's going backwards. Bloody response to the attack on U.S. personnel somewhere in the world. Americans will, across the spectrum, be shocked. Just shocked. Are you shocked? Are you? You shocked? I'm not shocked. I was waiting for it. I knew it was going to happen. All right. And if anybody didn't, then you believe all of the horse shit that Trump throws at you. Yeah. I'm Mr. Bully, and I'm going to take out your top commander, and I'm going to provoke you, push you into a corner where you're going to have to respond, and then I'm going to come after you. Big time. All right. So, no, I'm not shocked. Iran only responded to the American assassination of perhaps the second or third most powerful man in Tehran's government. Well, an Iranian-backed militia had attacked the U.S. embassy in Baghdad, though this was for the Americans a bloodless event, but the U.S. had killed some 24 members of the militia in a series of airstrikes. Well, that was in response to the group's alleged responsibility for a rocket attack on a U.S. base in Iraq that killed an American contractor, but Trump had been funneling extra U.S. troops into Saudi Arabia, Iran's sworn enemy, and de facto sanctioned numerous illegal Israeli airstrikes on Iranian personnel and Iraqi militias in both Syria and Iraq. Well, in September, Yemeni Houthi rebels, loosely affiliated with Iran, claimed responsibility for temporarily crippling an attack on Saudi oil infrastructure. But the U.S.-backed Saudi coalition had been terror bombing Yemeni civilians for 4 years, causing the world's worst man-made humanitarian disaster that our mainstream media is silent about. But the U.S.-backed Saudi coalition had been terror bombing Yemeni. Oh, I just read that. Maybe I should read it again. They're terror bombing Yemen, causing the worst humanitarian disaster. Hello? I don't even think Americans, most have no clue what we are doing overseas. But in June, Iran shot down an American drone that was allegedly over international airspace. But the Trump administrations had labeled the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, which Soleimani commanded, a foreign terrorist organization for the first time in history. But then Iran designated U.S. Central Command, which has responsibility for the entire Middle East, a terrorist organization. In response, days later. Well, in May, Trump claimed that Iran was behind attacks on a few Saudi oil tankers, but a year earlier, Trump had unilaterally pulled out of a multinational Obama-era nuclear deal in spite of clear evidence that Iran had followed its strictures. Furthermore, rhetoric in Washington, particularly from John Bolton, had grown increasingly pugnacious, and later Bolton reportedly ordered the Pentagon to update plans to send 120,000 troops to the Persian Gulf. Well, Iranian troops and friendly militias had long been meddling in Syria to back Assad, though they were, unlike the U.S., invited. Oh, Iran was invited into Syria, unlike the U.S., that just invaded the country. But Iran could argue that the U.S. had indirectly backed al-Qaeda elements in Syria, and through its ill-fated invasion of Iraq, set the conditions that created ISIS in the first place. Well, according to the official Washington line, at least, Iran had backed the militias and provided the technology to kill hundreds of U.S. troops in Iraq, though we have no evidence of that. But even so, the U.S. had invaded both of Iran's main neighbors, Afghanistan, Iraq, surrounding the country with American military bases. Furthermore, Iran felt genuinely threatened, which was understandable given that the Bush administration, were itching for regime change. And now we hear mainstream media reporters and government officials, they use that term, regime change, like we have a right. We have a right to meddle in some other country and pull out their leaders and then install our puppets? Do we have a right to do that? Of course we don't. But it's become so normalized that Americans don't even raise an eyebrow. Bush administration. Everyone wants to go to Baghdad. Real men want to go to Tehran. That was a common phrase, the neocon circle in Washington. Bush had even included Iran in the axis of evil. Declared, America is the primary aggressor. But if you go a little bit further back, Bush would argue his invasions and rhetoric were justified, since some Iranians had long chanted the U.S. was the great Satan. We put them in as the axis of evil. Oh, well, we can do whatever the hell we want. And nobody has a right to challenge us, right? They even burned an American flag. And according to a U.S. judge, though there's great debate on this, according to a U.S. judge, Iran had been responsible for the Khobar Towers bombing in 1996 that killed an American serviceman. Killed American servicemen. Men, plural. But during the 8-year Iran-Iraq war, which caused perhaps 1 million deaths, the U.S. Navy waged an undeclared maritime war in the Persian Gulf. In the tanker war, the U.S. flew the stars and stripes on Kuwaiti vessels to protect them from attack, and finally, in April 1988, overtly sank the majority of the Iranian Navy in a one-sided sea battle. Well, during the existential war, Iran had attacked Iraqi and its allies' tankers. Furthermore, its Lebanese partner Hezbollah had taken several Americans hostage. But throughout the war, 80 through 88, which Iraq had started by invading Iran, the U.S. openly backed Hussein and his aggressive regime. The U.S. provided key intelligence in the form of satellite photos to the Iraqi army, granted Baghdad over $1 billion in economic aid. Reagan, in an absurd twist of irony, sent a special envoy, Donald Rumsfeld? Yeah, to meet with Saddam. Saddam regularly employed poisonous gas to attack Iranian formations, and the U.S. agreed, go for it, supplied satellite imagery, allowing Iraq to better calibrate those illegal, immoral chemical attacks. Well, in 1979, during Iran's Islamic Revolution, dozens of American embassy personnel were taken hostage. And that was like a staged affair. They were held for more than a year and released right after Reagan became president. But here's the kicker. Back in 1941, though Tehran declared neutrality in the World War, Russia and Britain jointly invaded and occupied the country to secure control of its oil reserves. Then in 1953, when a democratically elected prime minister dared to nationalize Iranian oil, which had been largely controlled by Western corporations, the CIA coordinated a coup with MI6 to overthrow the government. The Shah was installed. The dictatorial Shah installed as the U.S. puppet and ruled with an iron fist for the next 26 years. America had armed, funded, and backed his regime for 2.5 decades. So, everything has a history and everything's connected. And yeah, there are ripple effects of everything. Nothing should be taken in isolation. So, an aggressive, illegal intervention to overthrow an elected government, one of the most intrusive sins in foreign affairs, amounts to checkmate in the blame game. Uncle Sam started it, and it still matters. We don't resolve anything. We keep accepting all of the lies. And I'm going to dare to say this. We deserve what's coming. All links are below.